Hey, Travel Brats. It's Soph
And Nat,
coming to you from the studio. And today we're super pumped because we've got an awesome guest that's going to teach you how to ditch your 9 to 5 to travel the world. Meet the woman who did just that and brought her kids and husband along for the ride. So, Nat, tell us a little bit more about who we're going to be interviewing.
so Karen King is a visionary entrepreneur, tech coach, and founder of Gold Star Pro, a platform that helps coaches and solopreneurs streamline their businesses and embrace location independence. After leaving her 9 to 5 burnout behind, she sold everything to travel the world full time with her family, creating a lifestyle rooted in freedom and purpose. Along the way, she founded Freedom Families, a 13,000 member community for families educating through global travel adventures, and launched the Escapepreneur Movement to support entrepreneurs building businesses that support their ideal lives. With over a decade of experience in marketing and automation, Karen blends strategy with simplicity, empowering others to grow confidently wherever in the world they choose to be.
So, you guys, in this episode, we're going to just talk to Karen and all about her digital nomadness, okay? And we're going to dive into her incredible story. I mean, from the corporate burnout to building a business that lets her work from anywhere, whether it's a ski slope in Bulgaria to a beach in Tulum. She's going to spill her secrets behind how she sold everything, embraced the world schooling lifestyle, and created a lifestyle centered on freedom, family, and fun. So, without further ado, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that intro. Like, I still have to pinch myself to think that you're actually talking about me.
Because
It's
you're awesome.
crazy. It's just
Now,
still blows my mind.
before we dive into your crazy, interesting life, which I'm so excited about talking about, I just have to ask about this kind of Shakespearean creation of words that I'm reading as I'm talking through your intro about solopreneurs and escapepreneur. Can you tell me, are those words that you came across or are those words that you created?
Well, solopreneur has been around for a long time. So, small business owner kind of doing it themselves, maybe with a VA. But escapepreneur is absolutely mine. If you ask ChatGPT, I coined the phrase and I'm trademarking it. So, yeah, but like the escapepreneur for me is someone who escapes the 9 to 5, escapes the hustle to build a business that can support an incredible lifestyle that they love, whatever that might be. For us, it's travel. For others, it might just be the freedom to choose how you live your life.
Wow, I love that. And what was your break free moment when you decided to leave the corporate life to travel full time?
My daughter really hates me telling this story, but it literally is the pivotal moment. She came home from kindergarten one day. Around Mother's Day, yeah, as kids do in kindergarten, she'd done a beautiful picture for Mother's Day, and she'd asked the teachers to help her write on it. My mum's favorite thing to do on the weekend, and she'd written is sleep. And, that sounds cute, but it really kind of broke my heart, to be honest, because it made me realize that something was wrong. Like, that was not what I wanted to do on the weekend. It was what I had to do on the weekend because I was so exhausted. 6 days a week, my own business, long hours, missing out on time with the kids, all of this sort of stuff. And it absolutely was a pivotal moment because it really made me stop and think, you know what, this is not what life is meant to be. And so at that point, my husband and I said, you know what, we've got to make a change. And at that point, it wasn't, hey, let's sell everything and travel the world. It was, you know what, let's pause the business for a little while and have a vacation. Let's go away. We booked a 7 week vacation through the States, down the coast of South America on a 3 week cruise. We went to Disney World for 2 weeks. Like we just took a break. And it
Mm.
was on that trip that I read the 4 Hour Work Week, or at least the first chapter of the 4 Hour Work Week, which introduced me to two words: location independence, which is being able to work online and live anywhere. And those two words absolutely changed my life. And of course, then we learnt world schooling because the next question becomes, well, how do we educate our kids if we're traveling the world full time? We learn about world schooling, and it all happened from there.
Wow, that's so neat. And I want to dive into that. Tell us about world schooling, freedom families, and kind of how that evolved and what it all entails.
So world schooling is educating your kids through travel. So instead of being in a classroom learning from a book, you're actually out in the world learning when you're in places. So for example, when I was at school, learning history, for example, we would read a book, we would, learn from the teacher. And for me, I was just so checked out. It was not interesting. In Australia, we're so far away from the rest of the world that it literally just didn't feel relevant. However, when you go to Berlin or when you go to Pearl Harbor and you are literally walking the path that, all of this history took place, you cannot help but be fascinated. And so when we started traveling, I thought, oh, world schooling is going to be amazing for the kids. I never actually realized how much I would learn from it. And I discovered I actually really enjoy history. I just don't like learning about it from a book. So it's all about learning from the world. And the big question for me, because we are traditionally educated, my husband and I, we did the whole school thing, I did university, all of that. We didn't have an issue with the education system. We just wanted more from life. So we pulled the kids out of school. And for me, the big test was my daughter, who was in kindergarten but never started school. So first year of school, she was meant to learn to read. I'm like, oh my goodness, she's not going to be at school. She's, is she going to learn to read if she doesn't have a teacher? Of course, she did, but it's a completely different style. So learning to count, she was counting as she's going up and down subway steps in London and Paris and, all of these amazing places. Learning fractions is because we do a lot of baking. And so we have to put in, quarter of a cup of this and half a cup of this. History, obviously being in places, but even from, things like we're out and about and we see some weird clouds. So we come home and we research those weird clouds and we do science experiments. And so you're actually learning from everything that's happening in the world. And as we all know, kids are absolute sponges. They want to learn. However, when we put them in school, that love of learning is actually, over time it's squished. When we pulled our son out of school, if I said learn, if I that scary L word, he would just like, no, that's, learning is that thing that happens in that place you force me to go to for, 6 or 7 hours every day. Whereas my daughter was like, oh, we're going to go and learn about, such and such. So yeah, it's about becoming adventurous and inquisitive and like we ask a lot of questions. Like we can't watch a movie in a 2.5 hour period. Like as a world schooling family, when we watched Pearl Harbor, it's a long movie anyway. It took us an extra hour because we had to keep pausing and researching, how many, planes were sent from here and, all of this sort of stuff. So you learn from the world as opposed to being in class learning.
I absolutely love that because I remember growing up with a lot of kids that you would kind of label them, okay, this person's street smart and this person's book smart. Like they know what's in the book and they can pass the tests, A, B, C, or D. But like when it comes to just like critical thinking and life decisions, they're so bad. They don't understand the world, and I think you're teaching your kids that like the world is both. And so especially with the travel aspect, you don't think about that where Natalie and I love to go to a museum in Europe or the United States, or when you go to a national park, you read the little, little sign sticking out of the ground that says, this is a spruce tree and this is where their home state is and this is where they came. And so like living life is just nonstop learning. And why does it have to be in the confines always of a classroom with not your parents, another teacher? I mean, that's if that's the way people want to do it, that's fine. But why not also have the way you've taught your children? So it's just a really interesting thing to think about. Now, I want to know were there any really difficult things about kind of making that change that you had to learn or adjust to?
Couple of things. Expectations, society's expectations was a massive thing because society teaches us to be happy. You should have a house, have a job, put the kids in school. Like you should do all of these things. And, when you sell all of those things and say, you know what, I'm deliberately homeless and I am going to travel the world, and it's not what society expects of us. So that was a big thing. And that's not just, society's pressure on us, it's our own pressure on us as well, because that's what we've spent our lives growing up thinking is the right way to be happy. It took me years to get over the fact that I'm not I don't have a house that I'm paying a mortgage on and, eventually going to own. And I mean, of course, I can still do that, but we'd sold our house and we'd started traveling. And there's been times where we've rented a house and, all of these sorts of things. But there was a lot of sort of guilt there for a long time. I'd see these houses and I'd be like, oh, I should have a house. I should be paying off the mortgage, all of these sorts of things. Um, and then beyond that, it's really just understanding that it is okay and it's a different way of life, but knowing that that's okay. So I guess it's, sort of all the one thing, you're breaking against what you grow up believing to be the right way to live your life. But once you get out there, honestly, right now, I could not imagine any other way of living. When I start talking to people who are, in a normal life, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what that's like. Because now I'm like, okay, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we said, you know what, we're bored here where we were. Let's go to Mexico. So, within a month, we'd traveled to the other side of the world and we're here for 4 months and then we'll go off to the next place. And that level of freedom is phenomenal. So, yeah, just knowing that it's okay to break away from what society expects of you is a huge hurdle.
So you founded Freedom Families and Gold Star Pro. Tell us about those.
So Freedom Families, which was originally World Schooling Central, um, was essentially it was the start of a new business that I was launching. I wanted to be able to educate other people about world schooling. So in my eyes, it was if I could just help one other family learn about world schooling, then, that would be amazing. Because I remember when we first started traveling, we met a family who had been doing it for 2.5 years, and I was absolutely in awe of, wow, 2.5 years. Just imagine if we make it to 2.5 years. And I wished I'd known about this 10 years earlier because there's so many decisions I would have made differently. But, it's easy to say that in hindsight. But I just wanted to help other families realize that there are other options than, traditional normal life. So World Schooling Central, which is now Freedom Families, was born out of that. And it's really cool actually, because the number of times I've met people along our travels that go, oh, I learned about world schooling because of your community. And in fact, one of my team learnt about it because of that. And when we first met in person, she said to me, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm meeting you. This is amazing. And I'm like, oh, okay. But, for her, I was the person that introduced her to it, and she's now been traveling the world for years and lots of different countries, and all of those sorts of things. So that's where Freedom Families came from. It was turning into a business where we were going to be doing tours with other families. So we've done tours to Indonesia and to Egypt, and we've taken sort of groups of 10 families at a time and created like these little traveling communities. And so we decided in 2019 to launch a new business where we would do this as our core business. And in 2020, we had 8 trips around the world planned. The first of which was scheduled to happen immediately after COVID was announced, and we were meant to be going to China. So, as you can imagine, all of that had to be put on hold. And because we were in Panama at the time, we were in a really, really strict lockdown. We had to create a business that we could do online. And part of the work that I've done over the years, building websites, working with business owners, and helping them get their business online, it was always really, really difficult because everybody needed, 10 different platforms and they were paying huge money. So we launched Gold Star Pro, which is an all-in-one platform with incredible support. So, non-techie business owners out there who are trying to launch a business but struggling with the tech side, we work really, really closely with them to launch their business and, help them use the tech. And then from there, we launched the Escapepreneur, which kind of brings it all together.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic, Karen. I want to know because I hear so many mixed things. Natalie and I started Travel Brats together in person, but we do work well even though we're remote from each other. But I've talked with entrepreneurs who have tried to start remote businesses, and some of them have loved having a whole team in all different countries or different states, and some of them have really struggled. Was it difficult building a business on the move and just totally remote from the rest of your team?
Yes and no. Because we've been doing this for a long time now, it actually wasn't too bad because all of this happened after COVID or during COVID, where Zoom had become incredibly normal. Working with my team, we might as well, we could be in person, but we don't need to be because we can jump on a call and we can chat. Just as, if we were in one location, we could walk into the room together. And interestingly, I think it was about 18 months or 2 years before we actually all met in person. So it was really kind of strange. We'd been working together for so long, but we'd never, been in person or given each other a hug or like whatever the case may be. So yeah, like it has its challenges, but no more than anything else you might do in life. You just have to adapt to it. So there's certainly ways.
Yeah. Now, is it difficult to make the jump? How did you deal with doubts, tech struggles, like family dynamics while you were building this whole new life?
Mindset is absolutely critical. And in so many ways, that has popped up from, will it be okay with the kids? Am I going to break them or ruin them because they're not in school? And, um, you know, the whole process is about creating something that goes against what is, considered normal, as we discussed earlier. So you just have to be so clear on what you want out of life. I knew that I didn't want a 9 to 5. I knew that I love new experiences, and that doesn't happen in a way that kind of really feeds my soul if I'm in those, four walls living that same life. We call it our Groundhog Day existence, where, you get up in the morning and get the kids ready for school and then go to work and then come home and do homework and feed them and put them to bed. And then you get to get up and do it all again. Um, so you have to be really clear on what you want and then just make that happen. And there are times where you won't know what that is. And that was another reason for creating Freedom Families, because I remember there was a time where I sat in my car. I think we were a month out from our launch date, and I sat in the car just bawling my eyes out because I was so scared of the decision that we'd made. I knew it would be okay, but it was going against everything that I knew in my life. And there's always people that say, oh, but what if? Or, oh, but do you think the kids will be okay? And of course, me as a mum, I'm like, oh, will they be okay? And that's where, Freedom Families works really well, because when you have those fears, you can go and you can ask those questions. So yeah, it's a mindset thing that you have to get past. But when you're really clear on what you want, there are so many resources out there that can help you bring it to life.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's what separates a lot of entrepreneurs or escapepreneurs from, people that really just want to have that comfort and stability, one house, 9 to 5 job, good insurance, and just have a safety net. I think it's a really different personality. I think you can train yourself to be the opposite, but it's so difficult sometimes to kind of jump into the unknown, to ignore the things like you said. A lot of people are saying you spent a couple years on this and it still hasn't worked, or are you sure you want to do that, or what about your kids or your husband, like, aren't you scared? So we in that imposter syndrome too, there's so many negative things that you have to battle. So kudos that you've done it and that you're encouraging people to go ahead and make that jump. Now, are there any big lessons you've learned from living in, Airbnbs to managing a team of 20 plus people from 20 plus countries?
So many. And it's hard to know kind of where to start, to be honest. The one that really has stood out for me is that you actually don't need a lot of stuff in your life to be happy. And this comes back to what we talked about earlier with society telling you how you need to live your life to be happy. And we all see it like, you need to have the car and you need to have the big fancy house and you need to fill it with all this stuff. And we literally built our dream home, which was this massive big home. And when I sold everything in that house, I put it all on Marketplace, and all of our furniture that we'd spent all of this time working hard to get, I sold it all for like $10,000, like everything in this massive big home. And that was a real eye opener for me. But beyond that, when we started traveling, we left Australia with like 7 kilos, like I think it's 15 pounds of stuff, like a backpack, and our laptops. And that was about all we had in the beginning. And it was so incredibly freeing. And then, Christmas presents, instead of I see friends at home with, every kid's getting like 10 different presents and all of this, we put that into experiences. Or devices that we will use along the way. So it might be, hey, you know what, time for an upgrade of our laptops or our Kindles or whatever. So we use that. Or, hey, you know what, let's go off and, spend a day horse riding and do this, beautiful whatever. Or, experiences create memories that are with you forever. Whereas, a new, bike or whatever, okay, maybe a bike creates memories, but like we grow up in a world where material items are valued so much. We kind of flip that and focus on experiences and memories and all of that.
That is incredible. And I can totally get behind that way of thinking and that way of living. And I want to ask because before we started this episode, we were chatting a little bit and talking about this kind of thing, about material items that I mean, all this that you're talking about. And you were talking about clothing. And I want to hear a little bit about, I was using the word capsule wardrobe. I don't know if that's necessarily the vision that you had when you started traveling, but how do you travel with less as far as what you actually put on your body and any other things you want to share about that?
Absolutely. I think capsule wardrobe is a really, really good description. In fact, about a year ago, I actually went through the process. I was so over the clothes that I had that I went through and, created a capsule wardrobe on Pinterest and then went out and found those items. And that's what becomes my day-to-day wearing. When you create that capsule wardrobe, there are so many different ways you can wear it. But honestly, like we go into someone's like into an Airbnb, for example, and put our clothes in the cupboard, and there's just not much of it. Like, and yet I rarely feel like I don't have enough. Of course, there's times where I'm like, oh yeah, my shoes have worn out. Now I can go and buy a new pair. Like you actually really appreciate what you have so much more. Oh, my handbag broke. Oh, great, I get to buy a new one. Or you get to the stage where you've worn those clothes for so long, you've literally worn them out, and you can go and buy a new one. But honestly, it's so much easier on a day-to-day basis, but it's also almost freeing mentally as well because you don't have all of the clutter. We started, as I said, with 7 kilos each. And initially, like we'd go somewhere and my daughter would say, oh, can I buy this toy or can I buy this dress or, whatever the case may be. And we'd say, okay, well, you've got 7 kilograms worth of luggage. What item are you going to take out of your luggage to be able to put this in? And sometimes she would say, you know what, this I like this item more than I like this item, and so she'd make that trade. Um, but then over time, like after during COVID and then post COVID, we've traveled a little slower, and we actually set up a home base. And of course, when you have a home, you start collecting a little bit more. And honestly, the more that I collect, it's almost like my brain starts to get foggy, and it's just all the more stuff I have the more kind of pressure I have. And my son actually said a few years ago, he said, Mum, can we just go back to 7 kilos or 10 kilos? Because it was just so much easier to live with less. And I thought that was really interesting coming from a, 16, 17-year-old boy. So, but yeah, living more simply actually makes life far more enjoyable. And you really, like I've said so many times, we grow up in a society where we're told we need all of this stuff, but the reality is that we don't. Now, obviously, if you're in a home and you're living that sort of regular lifestyle, you can have a bit more than 7 kilos. But the fact is, you actually don't need 23 pairs of shoes. We've traveled. Initially, I think I had 3 pairs of shoes, which was still kind of a lot at that point in time. Um, but keeping it simple just makes life simpler in general. So.
I think that's fantastic. And let me just say first, I love that your own son, because kids are so difficult with that. I want that toy. I want another pair of shoes. I want clothes. I want Rice Krispies and Pop Tarts. That you've trained your children to not be wasteful with money, to not be wasteful too with just things. It's not necessarily always about the money, where, that's going to be great for sustainability, having a capsule wardrobe and also, like you said, teaching them the value of things. And where do you want to spend your time and money? Do you want to spend it on materialistic goods, or do we want to have experiences with mom and dad, with your wife and kids when you get older, son, or do you just want stuff? Because stuff doesn't solve a lot of problems. And like you said, in fact, sometimes it makes it worse. So, I just think it's so great. It's so interesting.
But then, having said that, when we went to destinations, like if we went to a country and we were there for a month, we would go and buy like craft supplies and, coloring in pencils and all of those sorts of things, use them for the month, and then, maybe donate them or, find somebody who would want them or, whatever the case may be. But it wasn't necessarily that we never had access to this stuff. That became part of the experience. So we didn't need to lug all this stuff around. We could, this month it might be, hey, why don't we buy all of these craft supplies and do coloring for a month? Next time it might be, oh, this month let's buy those little clay packets and we can do clay for, the month. And so you actually got to still have those experiences. Like we certainly didn't hold back from those things. We just did it in a different way. And it became part of the experience as opposed to we need to have all of this stuff. Be like, all right, let's, deliberately buy this stuff and have this experience.
So cool. Part of the learning and part of the lessons. Yeah. Well, Karen, that's awesome. I want to transition a little bit and we're going to ask you some low key, rapid, random questions that we just, by stalking you, are so interested in asking. So I'm going to start with just asking you, Karen, how many countries have you traveled to?
57 now.
And do you have a favorite?
Mexico. We're literally about to set up a base in the new year here in Mexico. We just love it. Such a happy country.
No way. Where in Mexico did you go?
At the moment, we're in San Miguel de Allende, so we love it. We first came here in 2017, and there were all these YouTube videos that said when you go to San Miguel, you'll never want to leave. And we'd been traveling for 18 months, averaging 10 days per location, and we got here and didn't leave for 8 months. We just love it. It's so happy, so colorful, so there's fireworks going off all the time, which is a Mexican celebration. And so every time you hear a firework, you're like, oh, somebody's happy. So yeah, we just absolutely love it here.
Wow. Do you have a favorite Mexican food? My family's Mexican, so I love Mexico too.
Oh, so many. Like there is just so many things. I don't like spicy food, which makes it a little bit tricky here. But just being like, I mean, obviously tacos. I love pastor tacos. I could eat it all day long. But even little things like the Mexican bolillos, the little bread rolls, we line up with all the Mexican people at the supermarket and get our little tray of these bread rolls that come fresh out of the oven. And oh, there's so many different things. But and the food's it's just so good.
Now, do you have any other favorite countries and why?
We also at the moment have a base in Bulgaria, which if you'd asked me pre-travel if I had any intention of ever going to Bulgaria, let alone living there. We've had a base there now for 2.5 years. We have a base there and we actually spend winter there. So we ski in this little town called Bensko. We live about 300 meters from the gondola station. We stay there for around 90 days, which is allowed via Schengen. And we buy a season pass and season rentals. Our season pass costs us 900 US for 3 months of skiing. Our ski equipment costs us 250 for 3 months of skiing. We jump on the lift in the morning, go up, have, 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and then we come back down, get some work done in the afternoon, and then, the next day we might go again or have a break and go the following day. So we love it because we first skied 17 years ago. When my son was 3, and we loved it, and we said, "Yeah, we're going to ski every single winter." We didn't go back for another 15 years and we started again in Bulgaria, where we can go so often and at a fraction of the cost that we spend each anywhere else. And on top of that, the apartment that we have, which is a beautiful apartment, is 400 US a month. So, it's phenomenal.
Wow. Bulgaria, that is, I mean, talk about a hidden gem. And so that sounds like your Wonderland life.
Yeah, I'm struggling for words right now. 400 a ski condo for 400 US dollars a month. And
It's
yes,
crazy. So we're only there sort of 3 months a year. We might go there for, a month over summer, for example. But even at 3 months of the year, of course, we picked up a dog as we were traveling the world because every traveling family must have a dog. Anyway, so she has an apartment in Bulgaria that we're paying $400 a month for. And we try to be there more often than that, but we have house sitters. We do a lot of house sitting ourselves. We go and travel the world looking after other people's homes and their pets, and we have people come in and look after our dog. And so she'll move to Mexico with us next year, but she loves it because she has people come in and they spend the whole time. It's a really popular area for hiking in the summer. So she has people come in and do that with her as well. So
Well, I am going to Bulgaria, and let me know, Karen, if you are renting out your house. I will play with your dog and ski to my heart's content.
absolutely.
Well, Karen, that's so cool. And what a cool, unexpected place to mention. Now, I want to ask you, do you have any, and I'm sure you have so many, but we love this section. Sometimes we do mini episodes on it, but we love asking our interviewees, do they have a most memorable travel story or stories that kind of really stick out? And they could be anything, happy, sad, crazy, funny, anything.
This was the one I needed to think about. um, oh God, there's so many of them. Okay, yeah, I've got one. It's not going to be what you expect, actually. Um, Absolutely. There are so many stories, as you can imagine. But the one that really stands out, and it won't be what people expect, was our experience during COVID. It was horrible at the time, but it makes for the best story now. We were in Panama at the time where lockdown was incredibly strict. Like literally, the kids left the house once in 6 months because kids were not allowed to leave the house. We were not allowed to go and exercise. We weren't allowed off our property outside of our permitted hours, which was 2 hours a day. Well, sorry, 2 hours 3 times a week. So women had Monday, Wednesday, Friday, men had Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday until the men of Panama misbehaved and then they lost their Saturdays. So it was really, really crazy strict. And then they banned alcohol on top of that, which when you're locked in your house for, eventually it was like 9 months. I don't drink a lot, but alcohol became important. So that in itself, horrible at the time, but crazy story now. But on top of that, the other part of the equation was because we knew we were going to go into lockdown and we'd set up a base in Panama, we said to the kids, all right, you know what, we'll buy a pet. And my daughter literally cried because she hadn't had her own pet since we started traveling. So we bought rabbits. And I said to the guy at the store, can you please check that they're not both females? Oh, sorry, that they're either both females or both males. And he said, yes, 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 I've checked. Now, hint, you cannot tell the sex of a rabbit until it's 12 weeks old. So they were not both females or both males. And one day we're watching TV, we learned all about rabbits. We are almost experts on rabbits now. And we were free ranging these rabbits. They had a litter box where they'd go and do their stuff. And we'd watch TV in the evening. The rabbit was stretched out with us, and I saw I saw his stomach move. And I'm like, oh my God, what's that? Felt its stomach, and sure enough, this is not a male rabbit, this is a female rabbit who has lots of babies inside. So here we are in lockdown, and a week later, we had 6 baby rabbits. And of course, we can't take these rabbits to the vet because there are no vets. They're not open at this point in time. So a month later, we had another 7 rabbits. Ultimately, I think we ended up with 17 rabbits during COVID. But
That is
honestly, it kept us sane. And we had the most phenomenal experience with these rabbits. There were jokes about this becoming our food source because of, COVID and the world running out of food. But yes, we ended up with 17 different rabbits. We were lucky enough to find other families that took these rabbits that one family took 3 rabbits and then they experienced exactly the same thing that we had. They ended up with lots of baby rabbits of their own. So yeah, like not the story you might expect from a travel family, but oh, like one of the worst slash best experiences that we've had.
Oh my goodness, that is so funny. Okay, so are there any landmarks that have changed your life?
Oh, that's well, I mentioned before Pearl Harbor and Berlin. They were two that were really, we went there because that's what people do. Like when you hear about these places, and even actually the Great Wall of China would be another one. We hear about these places, and a lot of tourists go there, but because we're world schooling, we do a lot of preparation. So as we're going to Berlin, we started watching, some documentaries and YouTube videos and all of these sorts of things. And this was an amazing way for the kids to learn, but also the teenage me that switched off whenever we talked about history in school. I learned a hell of a lot as well. So then when we got there, it actually mattered. It really, really mattered. And you see everything that you've heard of, you see it come to life. Hiking the Great Wall of China was phenomenal. If you get an experience, I don't know if the two of you have been there, but if you get an opportunity to go and do that, absolutely phenomenal. It was one of those moments that I'm like, am I actually doing this? Like you see all these pictures and you hear of the Great Wall of China so much, and then all of a sudden you are literally on there and you're taking these iconic photos. And then as a bonus, there is a toboggan ride that goes from the top of the Great Wall of China down to the bottom. And that was phenomenal as well. So yeah, those are a few. Obviously, there's been so many different things that have had an impact, but those three certainly had a huge impact.
I have been to Pearl Harbor, and that was really somber and interesting. And just to, where they do the audio tour to go through those stages and picture yourself on that day. We went at the same time on a Sunday, like when it happened, X how many weeks back. And so that was great. Wall of China is on our bucket list, and Berlin would be so great. Although both of those walls are on a big bucket list.
So we ended up in Berlin purely by accident because as Australians, so far away from the rest of the world, at one stage we ended up in London and we had a month to fill. And we were genuinely overwhelmed by how many countries we could get to so easily. And so what we did was we said, well, let's book the cheapest flight. We were very, very budget when we first started traveling. Let's book the cheapest flight out of London and just go there for, 4 or 5 days. So we went from there to Bucharest, which again had never intended on being there. Did forget to look and see that it was the middle of winter and that there was like 3 feet of snow there at the time. But anyway, we went from there to Brussels, to Berlin, to Rome, and then up to where we were house sitting in Sweden. But so we went purely by accident, and it was phenomenal. Like we were so interested to go there, but it was way more than we anticipated it would be.
Wow,
Mm.
that's amazing. Now, speaking of cool places, where's the coolest place you've taken a Zoom call?
Ooh, so many. Actually, I think I might have. Well, it wasn't a Zoom call, but I did a Facebook Live on the toboggan coming down the side of the Great Wall of China.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was very, very cool. The whole video is me just pissing myself laughing. But yeah, there's been so many. One of the things I obviously have to be really conscious of is that I have a really good internet connection, and it hasn't always worked out that way. So, we don't always necessarily go to areas that are too remote. Um, but yeah, there's been some crazy places. We've been in Egypt. I was literally on a bus, talking to somebody via Zoom, and here's the pyramids and, all of this behind us. So yeah, crazy, crazy places.
That is just unbelievable. And we haven't really talked all that much about what it's like traveling with kids, although it sounds like your experience has been pretty amazing that your kids have traveled so well throughout all these years and they've loved learning through experience. But inevitably, when you have young children, which yours were young when you guys started out, there are going to be meltdowns. There are going to be times where they get overheated, like, or and they just, their emotions get overwhelmed if you're in a place where they're just like, oh, I'm sweaty and I'm tired. And of course, that's just one example, but I can imagine that there might be meltdowns along the way. How do you deal with those? What happens and what do you learn from those experiences?
I think one of the biggest things we realized maybe 3, 4 months into our travel is that the way we travel is not a typical vacation. A vacation is something we save up for. We might spend a year or two and we go for a week or two, and it's like you've got to pack everything you possibly can into those 2 weeks to make the most of every second. World schooling, whether it's full time, whether it's part time, whether it's just, hey, you know what, we're going to go away for a month, is much, much slower, or it needs to be slower because you are with kids. Our kids were 11 and 5 when we started. Um, and what we did, which so many new world schooling families do, is we went out really hard. We were so excited to see the world that we, as I mentioned earlier, the first 18 months, we averaged 10 days in each location. Our second month in the world, We went to Europe. We were there for 32 days and we did like 6 countries or something. And then we had a 1 month house sit, and I swear we only left the house twice because we were so exhausted. So that is not the right way to do it. What we realized really quickly is that you are living your life in the destination that you are in. So you have to do your grocery shopping. You have to, get out and go for a walk. You have to take the kids to the park to have a play, find the movies, like just normal life in a different location. And that is what's truly fascinating about world schooling, is seeing those differences. One of the things that always stood out for me, and I don't know why this always pops into my mind, like in Australia, when we go grocery shopping and we buy frozen vegetables, they come in a packet. One country we went to, there were literally these big buckets in the freezer section with a scoop, and you got your bag and you scooped out your frozen peas and put that into the bag. So like little things like that I find absolutely fascinating. How do people do the same things we all do in different ways? Um, so then the other thing that we realized really quickly was we needed downtime, and it is okay to take time off. So we very quickly said, you know what, let's change this up and do a day of exploring, a day at home, a day of exploring, a day at home. A couple of things happen when you do that. Your budget doubles essentially because you're only going out half the amount of time. So the same budget stretches further, but also you have time to just, veg out, to have a movie day, to let the kids just hang out on their devices or play games or whatever the case may be. So I would say that the most important thing is just going a little bit slower and knowing that you can always come back. I am or when we started, I was such a planner. When I was living my normal life, every minute of every day had to be planned. Because I didn't have time to waste even a minute. So when we started traveling, I'm like, okay, on this day, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And on the next day, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then I'd almost be panicking because, oh my God, we were too tired. And so, we didn't get to the Eiffel Tower today. So, we were trying to travel so that we could enjoy life. And I was actually making it more stressful. So we learned really early on that it's okay to not see everything. You don't have to do everything and see everything on one trip, because when you are traveling more often, you can always come back. It's always going to be there. So yeah, taking it easy and just enjoying the time that you've got, enjoying the little things, realizing, we talked about traveling light. It's also about, you don't have to spend a fortune. You don't have to go to the Eiffel Tower and pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get up to the top of it. You can go to the Eiffel Tower and, without realizing it, have a competition who touched the Eiffel Tower first. And that became what was exciting, taking photos of touching the Eiffel Tower, or, taking photos of it from underneath. You can actually really, really enjoy life without it costing a fortune. And that was a big eye opener too for a lot of people. For us, especially in the beginning, it was cheaper to travel the world full time than it was to live our ordinary life in Australia. And that's something that really shocks people when they first sort of start looking into world schooling.
Yeah, really. I mean, this has all been so interesting. I think some of the biggest things you said that I love are just being able to see the world and the different cultures. I think that's a huge part of a learning process. And a lot of people would say, oh, we don't travel a lot because we don't have money. And it's like, well, you just said that living like a nomad, it's cheaper than living a South African or American lifestyle, so a lot of these things that we just assume would not be affordable or possible. And then, like you said, the little things, I think it's so cool. Well, speaking of eating customs, I want to know one snack that you always pack, no matter the country.
Ooh, well, Vegemite.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. That is our little piece of home that we take with us. And it's funny, like we get so excited. There's been times that we haven't had it, and we go to places, usually like the US or the UK or something, and we find this little jar, or anything from home is probably the key to it. So when we find, Tim Tams or Australian chocolate or whatever the case may be, wherever we can go, we find those things. Beyond that, though, really just try to enjoy whatever we find. We'll find different things in different countries. Um, in the beginning with kids, it can be a little bit challenging. I swear my daughter ate nothing but chicken nuggets and fries for the first probably year or two of travel. Um, but what we cottoned onto really quickly is that chicken nuggets can also be like tofu nuggets or fish nuggets, or as long as she thinks they're nuggets. So we try other things along the way. Our kids made a YouTube video at one point of trying snacks. I think we were in Thailand at the time. So they went out and they bought all the snacks and sat down and tried them all and didn't enjoy very many of them, unfortunately. But it's about trying these things because we have the things that we like at home. But getting out into the world and trying them, but then knowing that it's okay to enjoy the things that you love, like your snacks from home when you can.
Yeah, I think it's so fun that you said Vegemite because my husband's whole family's from New Zealand. So they're huge on Vegemite and I've tried it. And I also think it's really, really fun to go to another country and try what looks like the thing you like in the United States. Like you said, fish nuggets, regular nuggets, and to say, oh, these cookies look like the ones that we like at home. Let's see if they're better, and try them. And so that's just a cool thing to do with the different cultures and the different packages and brands they all have. So yeah.
Absolutely. We've incorporated so many of the foods that we've eaten around the world into, day-to-day life. When we go back and visit our family in Australia, of course, they always like us to cook some of those things, but Mexican street corn, for example, is just kind of a regular in our house. There's so many little things that we've picked up along the way that we absolutely love. So yeah, it's just getting out into the world and experiencing. Like we know the things that we know in terms of the way that we've grown up. One thing that really shocked me was we grew up watching a lot of American TV, and it felt like, oh, they're much the same. I really didn't expect the differences between the US and Australia. Like the differences are phenomenal. We spent 4 months in the US just recently, and again, picturing me in my mindset before we started traveling, these places are very similar. When we actually got, I think we were in Nashville, and every time we went somewhere, they'd be like, "Oh my God, where are you from?" And we'd say Australia, and they're like, "Oh, I've waited my whole life to meet an Australian." And like in my mind, we're much the same. I don't see the big difference. But when we actually started traveling, you realize that there's such massive differences, and the way that people do normal activities is so incredibly different in other countries. So yeah, it's really fun to experience those things, and even like the language and the words people use and all of those sorts of things. That's been one of my favorite parts of travel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's one of my favorite parts of travel is just learning of the differences of how people live their lives while also connecting over the things that make us human. So, Travel Brats, in closing, here are a couple things that I think I've learned from talking with Karen, and I hope that you all have learned. Number one, your job doesn't have to tie you down. Two, education doesn't have to be traditional. Three, you can travel with your kids and not lose your mind. And last, even if you're not techie, location freedom is still possible. So, Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. And y'all catch our part two, which is all about making the escapepreneur jump.
Catch you guys next time.